Welcome to the Write It Down podcast at Home Edition. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, bringing you one-on-one interviews to challenge, inspire, and encourage. Today, we have a very inspiring guest. I was very excited to bring him onto the show. His name is Warren Moon. You may know him as a Pro Football Hall of Famer. He was inducted in August of 2006. He was one of the only African-American quarterbacks of his time, and he defied a lot of odds. He tells us that he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder that drove him to success, but he also knew deep down that he didn't want to settle for anything less than the dream that was put on his heart. I'm excited to share his story with you, and I know you're going to be encouraged and inspired by his story. You know what to do. Sit back, relax, and get your pens ready because this is Write It Down. Welcome back to the Write It Down podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, on the mic with our special guest, Warren Moon. Warren, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Brooke. Really appreciate it and looking forward to our conversation.
I'm looking forward to it as well. We met a couple weeks ago at the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction, and it was super cool to meet you. I was off the side of the stage, and Marcus introduced us. Marcus has been a dear friend of mine and a dear friend of Write It Down podcast for many years, and he is the greatest. So anybody he introduces me to, you guys all have a common thread of humility and passion and a great story. So I'm pumped to share your story today. You definitely defied a lot of odds in your life. And I absolutely love the fact that you wore number one for a reason. So why don't we rewind back into time of why you wore the number one and what you knew was so special inside of you?
Well, number one to me signifies being the best. And that's something I always wanted on my jersey, first of all, as a constant reminder to myself. That's what I wanted to train for. That's what I wanted to be. Always striving to be the best at whatever I was doing. And at that particular time, it was playing quarterback. And then it was also a constant reminder as a leader on my team would look at that number as their leader and say, this is where we strive to be as well. So they understood that our goal was always to be number one, to win our division, to win a championship, to be whatever it is. We wanted to be the best. So that number one was a constant reminder to me of where I wanted to be as a quarterback, and where our team wanted to be as a team.
Yeah. And, with your story of just the seasons of life that you were in and at the point of time you were in history of being an African-American quarterback and defying odds in that realm. But I would love to kind of dive a little deeper into the emotional response of that in the sense of I know in my life, and I know those who are listening right now have had moments where people have genuinely thought that they were not worth it or that they weren't worth investing in or that they didn't have it. But then deep down, there was something inside of them that was like, no, I know there's this calling on my life. I know that I don't want to settle for second best. Like you didn't want to settle for a different position. You could have played it and you would have played really well because you're an athlete but you wanted to be a quarterback. And there are so many people that go through this, whether it's in sports or just in their everyday jobs or wanting to be a mom, or there's little things like that where deep down, you have what it takes, but everybody else has a different narrative for you. So what were some of the things that you did mentally to just kind of combat that?
Well, when I first started playing quarterback as a 10, 11-year-old in Pop Warner football, um, I knew if I wanted to play it at another level or higher level, it was going to be difficult because there wasn't a lot of quarterbacks that looked like me as far as my color was concerned. So I knew that would be a hurdle that I'd have to get over, that there would be some adversity there. And I still continued forward because I felt like I was good enough to play quarterback. I had been successful at every level that I played the game at that position, whether it was Pop Warner, like I said, as I went into high school, the same thing. As I went into junior college, the same thing. As I went into college, the same thing. So I always excelled at every level. So that's one of the things that kept me positive, that as far as my peers were concerned, I was as good or better than most of my peers. So no matter what other people told me, and I knew some of those things weren't exactly true, they were telling me there were more excuses, but it was basically a lot of based on my skin color, that as long as I continued to keep working hard and proving what I could do, somebody somewhere down the road was going to give me the opportunity to play the position, and then I had to be ready. Otherwise, if I got down on myself, if I started thinking negative thoughts, if I started thinking about quitting or going to another position, then that's not exactly what I wanted, and I would have failed by then. So I probably would have gave up the sport before I would have changed to another position because I didn't believe in playing another position. And if you don't have that belief that you can play a certain place, it's not going to happen for you no matter what your athleticism is all about. So quarterback is what I thought I was made for because of my upbringing, because of the maturity that was thrust on me at a very young age when my dad died at 7 years old. I took on a very man type role around my house because I had six sisters and a mom. So I
Oh,
was the
wow.
male figure in my household. So right there, I gained maturity beyond my years of a 7 year old, and then I just had the ability to get people to rally together. I was the guy that set up everything in our neighborhood as far as if we played against other streets and other teams. I set up all the leagues. I just did all these different things. I was a big organizer at a very young age because my mom was that way, the way she ran our household. And I learned so much from her. So all those things combined with my athletic skills and being able to throw the football led me to think that I could be a really good quarterback because of my leadership skills and because of my athletic ability. So I wasn't going to let anything deter that because I knew I had been successful all the way along the way. And I wasn't going to get all the way to the end once I got out of college and say, okay, I'm going to give in now and go and play something else.
Yeah. I mean, leadership was definitely thrusted upon you in life. But something that you said that really caught my attention through that answer was you said you wanted to be ready when like the opportunity presented itself. And I love that because that's honestly like that faith, that belief that like what you have inside of you, like you might as well prepare for it. Right. And so
Right.
I really love that because instead of, succumbing to what people were saying or settling, like that's like probably one of my biggest pet peeves and fears, at this a healthy fear I have in life is settling, like for anything less than what I feel like is my purpose or whatever. And I love that because that's so inspiring what you said about being prepared. Like at some point someone's going to have to give you an opportunity,
Right.
like whether it's the opportunity you thought it was going to be or a different door that was going to open for that, dream come true. And I love that you were like, no, I needed to like get ready. And so fast forward into your career, you had a different door open for you for football with the CFL before you went into the NFL. So at any point did you feel like you were going into a league that was second best? Like, did you have hierarchy in your head? Was the NFL the goal, or were you just content to keep playing football?
Well, it had happened prior to that, coming out of high school. I'm a high school all city quarterback, player of the year in my conference, all these different things that I had the accolades in order to deserve the opportunity to play major college football. And none of the major colleges that I wanted to play for that really threw the football wanted to recruit me. So uh, I had to go to junior college for a year. And that's something that I didn't want to do. So when you go from high school to junior college, you feel like you're going to a lesser league right there, as opposed to going to an NCAA school. So I had been through that before, coming out of high school to have to go to junior college in order to get that major college scholarship. So I had been through that. So when I had the opportunity to play in Canada and play quarterback, same thing. I knew that I could play quarterback. I was going to go play whoever was going to give me that opportunity. Junior college was going to give me that opportunity to play it. And I went there and I excelled, and I made sure I prepared myself for when that opportunity did come to play major college football, and it came along after that first year of junior college. So uh, that was my mentality always, and I think again I learned a lot of that from my mom. When my dad died, my mom was basically a mom at that time, but she went back to school and became a RN nurse, and
Wow.
prepared herself to get ready to be successful so she could take care of her family. So I learned a lot from watching her in that realm. She didn't give up on life. She didn't say, "Woe is me. I've got 5, 6 kids here, and what am I going to do with no husband around?" She didn't do that. She went and prepared herself, and still was able to take care of her family and move on. So that so much of what I learned was from her, and that's why I just kept plugging along, because a lot of my motivation was to see the sacrifices that she made for me. I one day wanted to be able to return that, and the only way to be able to return that was to be successful in my life, whether it was be a professional football player or get my education in college and go on and be successful in business or whatever it is I wanted to do. At that particular time, I wanted to go to law school if football didn't work out for me, but um, that was my mindset, and I wasn't going to let anything change it.
Yeah.
And I was very confident. I was very cocky. I was very, I don't know, confident and cocky are two really good words to
Ambitious.
and very stubborn. Stubborn
Yeah.
is a good word that really signified me during those days. I wasn't going to let anybody tell me that I couldn't do something,
Yeah.
uh, especially if I'm watching myself do those things against the best of the best in that particular era of my life. So um, that's just kept me moving forward.
Yeah. Well, what were relationships like in those days? Like, did you have a core group of friends that believed in you? Was it, were people only friends with you when you had success? What was that life like for you?
Yeah, I definitely had my family support. You know, my mom was a big supporter of mine. You know, having your mother sitting up in the stands watching you play, there's nothing better than that. And you want to impress her. You want to play your best all the time. You don't want to let her down. But I also had, you know, different coaches that were in my corner that believed to be my high school coach who as a junior saw me working out in the offseason and said, "You're going to be my varsity starting quarterback next year." Given the fact that as a sophomore, the freshman coach didn't want me to play. He didn't play me at all. I was a third string quarterback, believe it or not, on the sophomore team,
Mm.
and I was discouraged from that. But when your varsity coach comes up and says you're going to be my starter next year, that gives you a lot of encouragement, and that makes you just want to go out and you know run through a wall for him to show him that he's not wrong in the decision that he's making. So I had different people along the way that really believed in me. And my college coach, Don James, when he recruited me to the University of Washington, he told me that he thought I could play major college football and he wanted me to be his quarterback. And those types of things really give you inspiration and give you motivation, especially coming up during a time where a lot of people didn't want to play you as a quarterback, even though they thought you were good enough, but because of the color of your skin, weren't going to play you in that position.
Yeah. So you've gone through this adversity and you say you're cocky, you're confident, you're stubborn. And I love that because you need to have a little bit of that edge to you when people keep telling you the opposite of your dream or the opposite of what you feel like you were on this earth to do and the
Right.
gifts that you've been given. And so I love that you didn't back down towards that. So you do say though that you were stubborn as well. At any point did resentment fuel you, or was it more of just people giving you hope continually?
Well, you heard the term a chip on your shoulder. You know,
Yeah.
I probably had a boulder on my shoulder most of the different stops that I went through, and
Yeah.
it was more about proving other people wrong, but not rubbing it in their face by proving them wrong, right?
Yeah.
Just showing them on the field what you could do, but you don't have to say anything about it. You don't have to boast about it. Let your play
Speak
be
for
your
itself.
outward talker, and that's what I did. So I use that as motivation, not only at those different levels of going from college, I mean high school to junior college to the pros, going to Canada. Even once I got into the NFL, I continued that. Um, Even after I became a very successful quarterback in the NFL, I used that every year as motivation for me that I wasn't going to let myself um, love myself too much. That I could still improve. I could get better in a lot of different places. So I continued to have that chip. And anytime you heard something negative from anybody out there, it gave you even more inspiration and more motivation to go out there and be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, though, it's like not like letting your like athleticism and your work on the field speak for itself. So it's that might be fueling you, but it's definitely not something that you're holding over people, or gloating
No,
about. Like let somebody else say it, but your works and your actions are proving it. Let's flash forward to Pro Football Hall of Fame where we met. Did you ever think that you would have been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
I think if you asked 100 players if they thought they were going to be a Hall of Famer when they were going into the league, probably 98 of them would have said no. You know, that's just not even something you think about when you go into the National Football League, being a Hall of Famer. You want to first of all try and make a team,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you want to be a contributor, and then at some point you want to be an All Pro, and then you maybe aspire, depending on the position you play, to maybe be an MVP. But all these things happen over a period of time as you progress and improve in the league. But even then, Hall of Famers are looked at as like gods. These are the best of the best that have ever played this game. And I remember when I came into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, there was only 200 and I think 20 guys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at that time. You're talking about out of 25,000 football players
That's
that
crazy.
played pro football.
Yeah.
So for you to be there, and even be considered for it over those first 5 years after you retire, it is an honor in itself. So no, did I think I was going to ever be a Pro Football Hall of Famer, especially after spending my first 6 years of my career in the Canadian Football League and then coming back to the NFL? No, I never even thought of that. My biggest motivation coming back into the NFL was because so many people told me that I could not do it, or so many people told my agent that I could not play quarterback. I wanted to prove to myself that I could play with the best players in the world. And that was my biggest motivation. I could have stayed in Canada my whole career and had a great career up there, made a ton of money. I would have been as big as you can get in the country of Canada, doing endorsements or whatever it might have been, because I really enjoyed myself up there. We won
Right.
5 championships my first 5 years up there. I was on top of the world, but in the back of my mind, there was this burning. Uh, it was almost like a burning curiosity to
Mm-hmm.
play with these guys. Because I
Yep.
watch the games on TV, and I'm like, I could be doing what this guy is doing right here. I could be playing like this quarterback right here. But until you actually do it, until you actually play against the best, you don't know where you stand up against that. So that's the reason why I really came back to the NFL to play, just to see if I was good enough to play with the best.
Yeah, I love that mentality because again, this can transcend into anything in whoever's listening. And there's that, like you were saying, that like burning curiosity. It's like there's this part of you that's like, okay, this is great, but I want excellent. And that's not to like create comparisons like those that are succeeding, in other areas or in places that you don't want to be. It's not putting notches, but in your heart and in your mind, you're like, wait, there's more. And I know I can do this. And so that's why it was probably another level of the feeling of surreal is when you're getting inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It was like, man, if you would have stayed, like you said, you would have had a great time, in Canada and with endorsements, and you would have made money and you would have, still had like a level of satisfaction, but it wouldn't be like full throttle.
Right.
And, I feel the same way in my life with certain things. Like, I live in a small town where, a lot of people get married to their high school or college sweetheart and they have kids and they buy a house, and all of those things are great. Like they're awesome. But definitely there's more curiosity in me than that. Right. Like there's that, and that's great. But
Right.
in my mind and the way that God's wired me, there's like, okay, but there's something else. And it's that curiosity keeps you hanging around a little bit longer of there's got to be something else. There's got to be another open door. There's got to be another opportunity. And that is exactly what has defined your career in football. And like I said, we met at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So how has it changed? How has the experience? That was my first time going to Canton. So how has that changed since you were inducted?
Well, first of all, it's grown. I don't know if you ever saw pictures of the original Hall of Fame building, the museum itself. They've renovated it 2 or 3 times since I've been in. They continue to keep expanding on it, trying to make it the best sports museum in the world. And I think it's one of the best, and they're getting ready to add more square footage to it now. So that part of it has really changed. I think the exposure, the yeah, mainly the exposure in the identity of the Hall of Fame is much bigger than it was when I first came in. They've done a great job of expanding their horizons as far as how it's perceived, social media wise, television wise, all of that. I don't know if you saw the construction of the Hall of Fame village that's going on there. There's
Yeah.
restaurants now, there's a hotel going up, there's a water park going in, there's all kinds of shops and different things. So it's going to be like a destination point for people to come not only and see the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but also have this great overall sports experience there with all the different attractions that they have going on. There's probably like some 14, 15 football fields out there where they put on clinics and all types of camps and different things. So the stadium is state of the art. It's not the biggest stadium in the world because they don't need that there, but it's a beautiful stadium the way it was put together. So they have a lot of different games there throughout the year as well. So it's grown immensely. I'm on the board of trustees of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so I've kind of seen all of this expansion and all this growth happen.
Yeah.
And it's been a great experience for me not only to be a part of the Hall of Fame itself with all the great players, but to also be behind the scenes and see the business side of it and see how we continue to grow.
Yeah. And you guys are through and through, not just with the inductees, but with the Hall of Fame as a whole and with the experience. You guys are really preserving excellence and things look really great and the feel is great. And what's so exciting about it, and obviously this makes sense as far as timing's concerned of when the induction is, but you just feel like, wow, it's football season. Like when I got there, I was like, you could feel it. Like everybody's excited. We're celebrating huge accomplishments of these gentlemen being inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but you're also like around people that are like, they bleed out their team's colors. Like they just do. And it's a really cool feeling to be there and be like, wow, like preseason and training camps are here, like we're here now, and then before you know it, regular season's going to be here, which is just awesome. And it cultivates an environment for that. And I love that it's got a family atmosphere where you can bring anyone there to experience it, and it's going to be for sure a core memory for some young people growing up. And I do think it's going to preserve just people wanting to be a part of the NFL. Like the NFL is obviously, there's only a select few people in the world that play in the NFL, and then there's select few people that make it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But over the course of the years, like fandom will always be there. Like,
Yeah.
I met people there that have been watching sports far before I was ever even born, and just their heartbeat. But then you can look to the right and see a little kid, with their hat on, that's just so excited to be around greatness, and it gives them something to aim for, whether it's in football or in something else. And so I really loved that aspect of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We're going to take a quick break to discuss Write It Down's brand new website. You can head over to widpod.com, widpod.com, and see all the goods. You'll notice a banner at the top of the page that says Learn More. If you click that link, it'll show you how you can support Write It Down. P.S. My favorite part about the website is the Wid Wall, which is a collection of all the Write It Downs from the show. This podcast is made possible by the 1513 Network, so show the network some love and support by listening to their other shows. If not, just stick with Write It Down, because I'm the coolest, the realest, the illest. Now, back to the show. Who in the league now, playing in the NFL, reminds you of yourself? Like, oh, I see myself in that player. Is there anyone that you can point to?
Wow. I've been asked that question before. It's kind of hard for me to compare myself to others.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't know the mental makeup of a lot of these guys, and you can look at them physically and see some of the similarities, but the mental makeup, personality, all those different things, you don't really know as much unless you really know those individuals
Right.
One-on-one. But I think Dak Prescott is somebody that kind of reminds me of myself because of the way he was not looked at highly upon when he came out of college. He was a fourth round draft pick to the Dallas Cowboys. Nobody expected him to be the starter, and there he was, the starter. His, I think, first year because Tony Romo gets hurt. And the next thing you know, he's taken off, and he's become a really good quarterback in this league. Um, he's somebody that kind of reminds me of myself, and not many of the others because a lot of those guys were high round draft picks,
Yeah.
or we didn't have the same body makeup, chemistry, and things like that. I was a pretty good runner, but I wasn't a great runner, and that's kind of what Dak is. I might be a better passer than he is, but he's become a really good passer, a better passer. So there's similarities there, and I think the leadership skills, and he was really close with his mom. His mom passed away.
Mm.
I think shortly into his career. And I think he grew up without a dad, so he came from a single family, I mean, a single mom home. So there's a lot of similarities in that, and I think those are the things that I kind of grab onto.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is exquisite. I mean, he definitely has that grit to him. And I mean, watching him play is great. I also got to see him at the like Super Bowl down in Miami when I went down there at Rich Eisen's show. And I mean, he's got stature
Yeah.
too, for sure. He definitely has that. And so I I'm definitely with you on that. How much do you think like a franchise has to play in cultivating a player's greatness? Like, do you think it is more the athletic ability of a player, or the franchise pours into you enough to make you excellent? Like, would you have done better in a different franchise? Would Dak do better in a different franchise? How much does it play with your role?
Well, I think it plays a lot because the quarterback is only as good as the people he's surrounded by because he can't do it by himself. He relies on a great offensive line to block for him. He relies on good receivers in order to make plays for him and make his job a little bit easier. And we've seen a lot of really good quarterbacks that come out of college or whatever and went to the wrong organization that didn't put the resources around him to make him successful. And that kid becomes, a bust, basically. A lot of times they lose their confidence, they get beat up very early in their career. They're never able to bounce back from that. So yes, the organization has a lot to do with it. And with Dak and Dallas, Dallas has done a great job of putting really good players around Dak and a really good defense. So he's had all the things that it takes to be successful. But yeah, an organization has to be willing to put the resources around a quarterback in order to make that quarterback's job a lot easier.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've never been, believe it or not, I've never been on a pro sports team. I know I look like I could be in a pro sports team, but I do know what it feels like to walk into a different place and the energy is different or the culture is different. And so, how would you describe even the culture of certain teams? Like, I have a friend that's in the NBA, and it's like when you're traded, you literally can walk into a locker room and it feel different from where you were 3 weeks ago. So how would you say that's the same way in the NFL?
Well, yeah, culture has a lot to do with the success of a football team. It's not all about talent, but you definitely have to have talented players. But you also have to have a culture that it starts from the top and works its way down. So ownership is a big part of that. How committed are they to the team, or is this just something that's a plaything to them, something that
Yeah.
they can just entertain their friends with on the weekend and say, I own a professional football
Throw their
team,
money at. Right.
or do they really want to win? Do they take an active role in it? And then it trickles down to the president and the general manager, the guy who's picking the players, and then the coaching staff. All those people have to be working in unison together, being on the same page, having the same goals. That's where it all starts right there. And then that culture is, somehow comes down into the football team, the way the head coach applies all that to the team. And then your leaders on your football team or whatever team it is, whatever sport, your leaders on that team are the ones that take that philosophy and that culture and kind of spread it through that locker room to make sure it transpires to everybody. So it's a when you hear that term, it takes a village to it takes a village to make anything that you're talking about. It takes a village to make a successful organization, and all these different people play a part in that in order to make it successful.
Is there anyone in the league that got under your skin, whether a teammate or an opponent that got under your skin, but then you became fond of them after you were done playing?
Wow. Nobody that did it on a consistent basis. I remember my only, kind of fight I had during my career was with a guy by the name of Derek Thomas, who's not alive now. He passed away very
Mm,
early, um, after a car accident and paralysis and all of that.
goodness.
But he was a really, really good player that came into the league, and we got into a little scuffle in the game because I thought he hit me late after a play was over, and next thing you know, maybe two off seasons later, he's coming to me in Houston, and we shook hands and made up after that play was over and all of that because he
Yeah.
wasn't a bad guy. But 2 years later, he's coming to me in Houston to try and shadow me to see how I ran my foundation because I started a foundation in Houston called the Crescent Moon Foundation, and he wanted to know, how I put it together. And so he shadowed me for a couple of days just to see, how my operation ran. So we became very, very good friends, and he started his foundation called the Third and Long Foundation, which is still going today, even though he's
Wow.
not with us anymore. But that just shows that you can get into an altercation with a guy and have a fist fight, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're two really close friends down the road. So that would be one guy that I had some type of altercation with, but it
Yeah.
was a very positive experience.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like just getting cooled off to see who a person really is.
Football is a very heated, very very physical game, and tempers do flare, and those things do happen from time to time. And it doesn't happen much with me because I'm a very very mild mannered, low tempered guy, but I do have a fire that I play with that a lot of people don't understand.
Oh, of course. And in the league today, even just in my time of watching football, there's a lot of hot tempers, which makes for a great, game. It makes for, entertaining. But I always wonder after some of those fights, I'm like, are these people friends in real life later? Or like, do they go grab a drink and they're like, hey, sorry about that, just
A
got,
lot of times they do. A lot of
yeah,
times they do. And a lot of times they're friends of theirs that these things happen with. And just like it happens with teammates, teammates get into fights all the time. I don't know if you've been watching around the NFL right now. After you get a couple of weeks into camp of beating up on your same guys every day, guys get a little bit testy as they get into training camp. It's hot. They don't want somebody giving them an extra push after a play is over or whatever. They get annoyed by it. Next thing you know, there's a brawl going on. So
yeah.
it happens, but we do have arguments in families, and families do argue, but they do make up as well because they love each other deep down inside.
Yeah, and there's a bigger goal at the end of it. We were just at the Miami Dolphins training camp, and I believe it was like 104, 105 degrees outside. Walk outside, and even the wind was hot. And
Yeah.
I just remember getting out, and I'm already pissed. I'm like, I don't like being this hot. I'm not in pads and in the sun. I'm in the shade, and I'm like, I'm about to have a heat stroke. I'm like, I'm too young to die. I'm very dramatic. And we were sitting there, we were watching them scrimmage. And it was, yeah, they were scrimmaging the Falcons, and there was a fight that broke out. I mean, and I missed it because knowing me, I was probably trying to like get air and being dramatic somewhere. But I remember looking over, and they're all, fighting each other and things like that. I'm like, that just seems like so much effort to be doing this during practice when it's 105 degrees outside. And they ended up calling the practice early. They all went inside into the complex because I think they were all like they ended training camp, well, for the people on the outside like 30 minutes early. And I was like, they're probably in there just like someone's gonna get actually hurt in this heat. So a lot of, again, a lot of egos. There's a lot of, outside, factors that can change a mood. So then when you're playing in a real game and there's a 300-pound man coming and take you out, and you're already a little tweaked in the ankle, or, you're upset with your coach or whatever, there's so many things that can happen. But like I said, I was always curious to see if people really are just friends afterwards. And so it seems like they are. This question was asked at the round table at the enshrinement this past Pro Football Hall of Fame. Who in the NFL or who had played in the NFL should be in the Hall of Fame that's not yet? Who do you think should be inducted?
There's a ton of guys, and I don't want to get into singling out one or two guys, but every year when you get through the Hall of Fame voting, and you get down to the final maybe 15 guys, they narrow it down from so many to so many to down to the final 15. And once that final 15 happens, uh, that's when they pick the final five guys from there. So if you ever get down to that final 15, you're usually going to make the Hall of Fame at some point.
Some point, right?
Depends on when.
Matter of time.
So anybody who wants to look on a list and see those final 15 guys of this year can say, okay, these guys will probably get in at some point, because that's usually kind of how it works. And I try and tell guys that go through this process and maybe don't get selected that particular year, or they're down and out about it. I just tell them, I try and make them feel confident that you're on the final list, and at some point you're going to get in. I don't know when that's going to be, but just kind of stay patient, because you're one of the best to ever play the game. That's why you've made it this far.
Right. And you guys have all learned the art of being patient and knowing that just because a door doesn't open for you immediately doesn't mean it won't later. And so
I'm a very good prospect of that. That's happened to me so many different times. But when I went into Pro Football Hall of Fame, I went in on my first ballot, so I was wow. I didn't have to wait, and I thought for sure I was going to have to wait.
You were prepared.
I've had to wait on everything else that I've gotten in my life, but that's what made it such a big shock for me and such an emotional experience for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And again, yeah, you were prepared to wait, and then it's like, oh, I don't have to wait. That's kind of nice. That's kind of nice. I don't have to exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I can get used to this whole open door thing pretty quickly. Well, Warren, we are getting closer to the end of our show. I like to ask a few rapid fire questions, a little less. I mean, I say they're a little less mentally challenging, but sometimes I ask them and I'm like, maybe nobody's ever thought this. And then we'll get to our write it down. So our first one is, on average, it takes 4 to 5 hours to run a marathon. Okay, that's a long time. Would you rather 4 to 5 hours? Yes. I ran the Chicago Marathon last year in 4 hours and 7 minutes. But there were people that are like straight up doing it in 2. But like for the average person, probably good 4 or 5 hours. So would you rather run for 4 hours straight or do burpees for 4 hours straight?
Oh, much rather run. I wouldn't want to do burpees for 20 minutes.
I wouldn't either, but some people,
some of the hardest things you ever want to do. Whenever we had to do those in football, I thought it was punishment.
Yeah, the fatigue. Did you have to do them wearing pads?
Yes.
Oh, I can only imagine. Okay, what is your favorite TV series that you've ever binged?
Favorite TV? God, these are so.
There are some good ones. You can shout out a couple. Most people are looking for recommendations anyways.
I used to love watching Good Times. It was the African American sitcom way back in the day. The Jeffersons, another one. Sanford and Son, another one. Of course, Friends is another one. Everybody really was into Seinfeld. I never was really into Seinfeld as much, but I did like Friends, and I did like Cheers.
Okay, I love Friends. I'm watching it consecutively now. I mean, I've seen it over the years or whatever, but I've been like watching it in order. Something else I'm watching in order, which leads me to my next question, is I'm doing a Marvel-thon and I'm watching it in timeline order. Are you a Marvel or a DC fan?
I'm neither.
Okay.
Never gotten into the comic book strips or the big time. My son was, and I've gone to a lot of those movies with my son because he was 16 years old. So whenever we went to the movies, it was either to see one of those superhero type movies. I like Spider-Man and I like Batman, but I wasn't a huge comic book guy.
Okay. So you like one from each. You like Batman and Spider-Man. So you got a little Marvel and DC in there. What was the name of your first pet?
The name of my first pet was a dog, a little poodle named Mitzi.
Mitzi. You would think with these questions I'm asking you, if I'm doing like figuring out your password for something, these are normally questions that you're like, what's your mother's maiden name? What's the name of your first pet?
Yeah, and that's what you have to try and remember somehow. And then
you're like, wait a second.
For some reason you come back and put that same information in there when they ask for it, and they say that's not correct. I'm like, that was the only dog I had.
That was the only, literally. There's no other name my mom went by, and before she married
that was my first pet. I'm sorry, there's no other pet.
I love it. Well, Warren, we are at that point of the show where I ask each guest, give the audience something to write down. What is your write it down?
My write it down is the title of a book that I wrote about 15 years ago, and it was basically based on my career and my journey, and I always went by that as I went through my career. It was called "Never Give Up on Your Dream," and that's what I never did in my life, because I had a dream to play in the National Football League as a young kid, and I never gave up on that dream. And that's what I titled my book as, and that's something that I live by, and I try and tell young people, whatever your dream is, whatever your goal is, never give up on that dream.
Absolutely. And that dream is there for a reason. So, just like with your story, we can be encouraged that just because the door that you thought was going to open right away doesn't mean it won't down the line. And there are so many people that want instant gratification, and your life was delayed gratification. But nonetheless, it was gratifying. So, Warren, thank you so much for joining us today on the Write It Down podcast. I'm glad to call you friend and thankful that I got to host you today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Brooke. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation. And good luck to you with your show as you go down the road.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Down podcast. This podcast is a part of the 1513 network. You can catch a variety of shows on their website, 1513.com. If you enjoy listening to Write It Down, please subscribe, share with your friends, and if there's any ink left in your pen, write a review. For more content, follow the fun on Instagram by following at WIDPOD. That spells WIDPod. Super cool. Stands for Write It Down Podcast, but it's abbreviated to WIDPod. Anyways, thanks for listening, and we will catch you later.